Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Paranormal Karen, funny too. Paranormal Karen, she's so spooky. Oh, and did I mention she's funny too? Yeah, cha-cha-cha.
Folks, my guest today, you know my obsession is the Portland, Shanghai tunnels. And one thing I know I can say about my guest today is he is a kind and patient man that put up with my 1,000 text messages to him asking him to be on my podcast today. But if you go to Portland, please go online, portlandtunnels.com, get a ticket, go see this man. I've seen his, I've been watching you on Mike. I've been stalking you online. He knows everything there is to know about the Portland tunnels, and I'm so happy to talk to you today. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So now I want to jump right in. I saw on one of the tapes, it said that the tunnels are one of the 10th most haunted places in North America. And I think that's an understatement. I had such a great time. Howard took us through the tunnel, the small tunnel that was under the comedy club. And he was the one that told me about you. How did you get started with the tunnels or connected with doing these tours?
Well, it was really by accident. I have a foster brother, and his real dad was in a veterans hospital, which we spent 6 months out of the year. He was in both World War I and World War II. His name was Dewey Kirkpatrick. And he would come out to, in Portland, there's an area called Lentz. That's where we lived. And he'd come out and stay with us, but he kind of knew how long he should be there. Then he moved to the downtown hotels. And my brother Tom and I would go down and visit him. Now, my brother is always in his dad's room watching TV, but I was in the big city and I was exploring. And I always made my way down to the hotel lobby. And that's where the old people were. And I realized at that young age that they were walking history books.
Wow.
And that their stories would not get into any books. And when they passed away, everything was gone. And at that young age, I realized that it's important to talk to these men, get their history. So I'd sit there, and I loved history. So I sit there and I ask question after question after question. And there was one guy that lived at this hotel. It's called the Lenox Hotel. And he was a grouch. I mean, this guy would never talk to me except he'd snarl and tell me to get out of his way and leave him alone. And I nicknamed him Captain Grump. and Dewey said, you are like my grandson. If I'm renting a room here, you can sit in that lobby and you can ask all the questions you want and don't let him scare you away. Well, it was a Sunday morning, and people asked me, how do you know it was a Sunday morning? Well, in the late 1950s in downtown Portland, if you were there on a Sunday, you would hear the church bells. And I guarantee it was a Sunday morning. And I had driven everyone out of that lobby with my questions except this one man. And he was just glaring at me. And I was glaring back. And finally, I saw a smile break over his face. And he goes, so you like history? Well, if you really want to know about the history of Portland, the true history, you have to go underground. We began talking about Shanghai and the underground network that existed. And I wasn't buying a thing he was saying, because after all, I wasn't born yesterday. I was 7 years old. And he finally stood up and said, if you don't believe me, you follow me. So we leave the hotel. Now, I thought he'd walk out a couple, 3 steps, turn around and say, hey, kid, I was just kidding. And he didn't. He knew I was following him. And we went into this area that was the first urban renewal project for Portland. And we went into this building that was half gone. And back in those days, nobody put cyclone fences or plywood walls like you see today. And we go into this building, and there's these homeless people sleeping there. And all he'd say to me, just don't step on anyone. And my little legs could barely get over him. Wow. I went over 3 days, and thank God I didn't step on anyone. Went into the middle of the building, and he reaches down to the trapdoor, moves some rubble, and pulls up a trapdoor. And we went down what some people call it a ladder, some people call it stair ladder, which is a term I like to use. It's something you see aboard ship, the way they're made. So we went down into this underground area, and we had some light because half the floor is gone.
I was going to say, it must be horribly scary for a 7-year-old.
Oh, and the whole thing was that I didn't want to be called chicken.
Yeah.
So anyways, he gives me a book of matches, a little book of matches. And, I have never touched a match in all my life. And I was more worried about not what I'm going to see down there, is I'm going to burn myself. So I hear this door open, this metal door. He pulls it open, and I light my first match. And an incredible new world opened up to me. It was a world of beautiful stone and brick, but also of darkness. And my life changed because I realized what this guy was telling me was actually true. Wow. So I'm making my way in, and I think I'm making a lot of progress, but my legs are really short. I'm doing the best I can. And then that first match went out. And somehow I was able to light a second match without burning myself. And at that time, I felt so comfortable. It's like I had been there before. And of course, I never have, but I felt like this is home. And I started moving a little bit faster. And he's talking to me now. And he's got the door open, and everything's fine, And then the second match goes out. And I was able to light a third match. And I didn't burn myself. And I felt so grown up until the captain said, "Well, kid, see you around, gotta go."
What?
And he turned away, let the door slam shut, match went out. I turned right around, went buzzing through that door, and about knocked him over. He caught up with me at the bottom of the stair ladder, says, "You've got to go back." And I said, "Not today, I'm not," because I knew Dewey was looking. I knew Dewey was actually looking for me. And oh my God, we got back to the hotel. He was so angry. Dewey was a Choctaw Indian, and he rarely got mad. But when he did what we kids would refer to him as doing the war dance, because he would actually dance and scream, and he's dancing around me. And the captain looks at him and said, "Will you stop that? You got to listen to the kid. He found something." So I told him what I had found, and he made me a deal. He wouldn't tell my parents if I promised him never to leave that hotel again, either by myself or with anyone else but him, which I did. And then what he would do is every week he would switch hotels. And and the reason why he did that, because the hotels had the biggest footprint on the block. And he would sneak me into different areas. Now, he could not go with me. He could barely walk. He had walk with a cane. So it was his job to distract the desk clerks so I could sneak in. Wow. And had many adventures. And then that went on for about 11 years. And then he eventually passed away. So I was on my own, and I was always in front of the wrecking ball. I mean, buildings are being torn down, and I'm getting into these buildings before they're demolished, and trying to absorb what history I could. And it was really sad to see all these beautiful buildings go and their history erased because of what we call progress.
Right.
So, and that was my entire life. However, in the 1970s, I decided, the only way that I could really get into these places is finding the residents who lived in the area and becoming friends. And so I actually moved down into what people would call a skid row. And I lived in the most unbelievable places you could imagine. And made friends with people, and they got me into different places I never would have gotten into, and helped me gather this incredible history.
Wow. Now, when you say they got you into these places, were they that these people knew where to get into the tunnels and what was going on? Was there still anything going on in the tunnels in the 70s?
What was going on there? There was no Shanghaiing going on, but there was some drug trafficking. A lot of people were living underground in the different areas. They also introduced me to certain business owners that had access, and that allowed me to get into places I never would have. So, but it was always kind of scary to go underground because you never knew what was waiting for you.
I can't believe that guy left you as a 7-year-old, was ready to close the door. I'm still freaked out about that. Never mind going in later. That's a tough way to learn.
Well, it was kind of interesting because my foster brother, who has never been underground to this very day, he will not go underground. He finally told my parents about 15 years ago what I had been doing. And my mom, she calls me up and she says, if we would have known what you were doing when you went to visit Dewey, we'd never let you go and you wouldn't be doing tours today. And so every night after I do a tour, do you know what I have to do?
Thank him.
I have to call my mom.
Oh, she wants to make sure you're safe.
Yeah, she's still around. She's 94, and she always worries about me.
Oh, wow. Now, was had she lived in Portland all her life, and did she know what went on in those tunnels herself?
No, she lived in Naples, Italy, and during World War II, my dad, who was in the Army, met her in Naples. But the interesting connection that we have to the underground, she was doing interesting things with the rebels in Italy. She would actually sneak into the prisons through the sewer system to feed the prisoners so they wouldn't die.
Wow.
So that kind of gives us a nice connection. Yeah. And I didn't really think about that until, maybe 10 years ago, what this connection is. And so maybe she planted the seed that underground is a good, because I grew up listening to her war stories.
Yeah, tunnels are in your DNA somehow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. So that is that's actually a really cool story about it. Really is your whole life. And I wrote down you started the tours 26 years ago, didn't you?
Yes. And I did it reluctantly, actually, because I'm a very picky person. I like things to be perfect, and the underground will never be perfect, especially what they did to it. I became a dumping ground for everything. And then I didn't know what was happening in people's imagination today because, the days before computers and stuff like that, there was storytelling and people actually listened and they learned the stories. But life had changed and people were so busy that sitting down and listening to stories and learning oral history, it wasn't the same. When I grew up, I listened to oral history and I had to, if I was going to get any kind of information possible. And I remember this old police officer did a lot of work with me. He helped me a lot. Al Zornato. He was a gruff old cop that became like a grandfather to me. And he helped me a lot. And he says, when you're interviewing people, give them respect. And if they're telling you stuff that sounds like it's way out there, treat it respectful, because you never know what's true and what isn't true. And if you don't treat it respectful, they'll close the door. You'll never get another thing from them. Plus, they're going to go and tell their friends that you're a good person, you're a respectable person, and they're going to share their stories and history with you. And I always remember that. And sometimes I'll get information, and then 10 years later, it comes true. I have the evidence that it's true. So that's what I learned to do. And it's so important. I'm glad he shared that with me, and I'm glad I understood what he was saying.
Well, yeah, because these stories, and which we'll touch on the history for the people that haven't heard the other podcast, the history of the tunnels and what they are. But it had to have been, and then I cannot wait to ask you the one question I've been waiting to ask you for months since I've been stalking you. The stories, which are, I'm sure, not in history books, right?
Correct.
They are, there, some of them have to be horrifying. I mean, I'll let you, tell the folks the stories of how everything started back in, 1850.
Yeah. Portland was a freshwater port, and it was, essentially a lot of credit goes to a man named, Captain Cooch, or some people pronounce it Couch. But the family got into an argument, and so one half calls himself Cooch, and the other half calls himself. And he and his partner, Captain Flanders, made a fortune during the California Gold Rush, and they actually brought supplies there. And he had heard about Portland, and or the area we now call Portland, and he stumbled onto the mouth of the Columbia River. And Columbia River has fresh water, and he knew as a sea captain, if this a ship, ocean-going ship, could actually come into fresh water and be there long enough, all of the barnacles on the bottom of the ship was going to fall off, which did a couple things. One, it made the ship go faster; it didn't have barnacles to deal with. The other thing, it didn't eat out the bottom of the wooden ships. So it's like taking the ship out of water, put it in dry dock, and having crew slowly scrape those barnacles off. Well, immediately the shipping company is making money because they don't have to do that. So he was in the area that we now call Portland. He kind of started all of this, and I had the privilege of knowing his I don't know how many greats it goes back. Well, he was one of his great granddaughter, Isabel Shipley, and she shared so much with me. And he actually, the area we now called Old Town, Chinatown, Japantown, was called the Old North End back then. And that was his donation land claim. That's that area. And nothing went on without his approval. And what she said, the family would talk about Shanghai in quiet whispers. And I love that, quiet whispers.
Yeah.
And back then, the people being shanghaied, which were, Shanghai, in case people don't know what it means kidnapping men and selling them to sea captains who forced them to work aboard their ships for nothing. And other places call this crimping. But the term Shanghai developed in Portland because of the furthest port these ships were going to go to was the port of Shanghai, China. So we used the term Shanghai in here. That's how that term started. And the earliest reference I could find of this is in an 1871 dictionary that finally it has this. And a lot of the old sailor dictionaries that go way back before 1870s never mention this.
Wow.
It's
so it's a Portland word. The word came from there, huh?
Exactly. And Portland was very different than other cities for Shanghai. Shanghaiers in other cities, captain would say, hey, I need 4 men. So, and I'm leaving at this time. So the Shanghaier, just before, a couple hours before the Shanghaier, the sea captain was going to leave, the Shanghaier would go out and try to find men. And a lot of times the order was never filled. If it wanted 4, they might end up with 2 or 3. Well, that meant there was a crewman missing, which meant what was going to happen now, the other crew had to pick up the slack, which caused morale problems, and it disrupted everything. So by filling the order for an entire crew, which was needed, that made the voyage go a lot smoother. So that's why Shanghai became so important, because you had to fill those missing places. Well, Portland was different because it collected their victims in advance and held them in holding cells. And then when they were ready to, just before they're ready to leave port, and this was all coordinated between the captain and the Shanghaier, they would go to the cell and feed these men. And what was in the food and the water was knockout drops. And they were going to eat because they're starving. And when they were knocked out, they hauled them through the underground all the way to the waterfront. They put them aboard ship and collected $50 a man blood money.
Wow. Wow.
And that's how it started. The underground really, as far as I can tell, started in the 1860s, but it really expanded in the 1870s. And these were actually built deliberately for Shanghai. Really have been lucky that became friends with a family whose great-great-grandfather and his partner built the underground.
Wow.
And so they've been sharing a lot of history with us.
Now, another thing that's very scary is that everybody was in on this.
Yes. In the old North End, yeah. The politicians were involved. In fact, the first city halls in the area was located in the old North End. The police were involved, and some of the beat cops rationalized that they weren't making enough. And by cooperating with the Shanghaiers, they made the extra money to feed the family. Big business was involved. And the people being Shanghaied were not residents. That's the most important thing right there. They were transient workers, sailors, loggers, cowboys, sheep herders. And they had no ties to their families. They were really wanderers. Or they were ethnic groups like African Americans, Native Americans, Chinese, Japanese. They had no rights back in those days. So if one of the members of the ethnic group disappeared, who are they going to complain to? And if they have somebody to complain to, who would they be listening to? No one really cared about them.
Wow.
And so they were the victims.
That is the part, I think, when you see what's on there, it's the level of organization that just gives you the chills. It's like a Stephen King movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, these Shanghaiers were physically powerful, economically powerful, and politically powerful. A lot of old-time boxers became Shanghaiers because you had to control your underground network and control which businesses operated with you.
And at one point, it wasn't just men. Were they also Shanghaiing women or selling women for, what is that, human trafficking?
Right. Back in those days, they referred to that as white slavery. And it was called white slavery not because just white women were being kidnapped and sold into prostitution. It was, which a lot of people believe that was it. No, it was women of all nationalities. It was white guys who were doing the kidnapping. They developed the term white slavers. And the name probably came from themselves, how they identified themselves, because they were white guys. And so the term white slavery developed from there. So they grabbed women from all ethnic backgrounds. And kind of the tie into the underground, the women didn't go in saloons back in those days. And if a lady worked for a saloon, she was protected. So they grabbed their victims right off the street, from dances, and from restaurants. Restaurants were the downtown restaurants were great places to find their victims. Wow. And they take these women, they lock them up into what was nothing more than a double-walled closet, and they would break them there. And what the term breaking means, they're breaking them from their past way of life. They make them believe that they can never go back home again. They would never be accepted. So their only hope for a future was in the hands of this horrible white slaver. And it took them at the most 48 hours.
Wow, people would break that fast. They just, shoo. Yeah.
There was one white slaver I actually interviewed in the 70s. He was in his 80s at the time. He had no remorse for what he did to these women. He said it was business and a great business. He made a lot of money at it. And he claimed it only took him 8 hours. He was that good.
Wow. That's about as that. And so it was, now I know people compartmentalize things in their mind, but would you say this man was a sociopath, or he was somebody that, nope, just those people aren't my people, so it doesn't matter?
It's hard for me to really label him, except I can just say this. It was the hardest interview I've ever done. A man that worked with me, his nickname was Big Ears Kelly. And big ears, what it means is not because he had big ears, but because he could find out things for me. And he'd listen. And listening was so important. Then he would report back to me, and he would bring people I could interview. But he warned me. He says, listen, you have to be on your best behavior. Do not get upset, visibly upset. You're going to be upset inside, but don't let that show on the outside. Ask great questions and listen carefully, because you'll never get another interview like this again. And I never have. And that was the hardest interview because I wanted to kill the guy. He was wretched.
Wow.
I guess that's the word for him. But he was like, it was all matter of fact. It was business, just business.
Was he married or had his own family?
Yes, but he was estranged from them.
Thank God.
And he had, grandchildren and great grandchildren, and he was that's the only time he ever talked to me, and which was I was really fortunate because I learned a lot of stuff, and it was horrible what I learned. But at least, And in our tours, we don't go into detail what happens to these women. We don't. It's the same thing going on today with human trafficking. They're still breaking the women and the men that are being grabbed. They're breaking them, and I don't think people really understand how fragile. People are strong, but they're also fragile, and they break people. They make them give up and think they can never go back home again. And back in those days, especially during days of white slavery, nobody knew how to treat people with that develop emotional problems with this.
Right.
And society, had this attitude that if that happened to you, that's your fault. And that's the way it was for the Shanghaian too in the maritime industry. Maritime industry made everybody believe if you were Shanghaied, you shouldn't have been in that saloon. If you shouldn't have been in the house of prostitutes, you should not have been into that pool hall or the opium den. And so a lot of times what the victims did for the Shanghaiers, they kept their mouths shut. Now, I've interviewed families who had a member that was Shanghai, and every one of those families would say he didn't want to talk about it. They didn't. They felt so bad, and that, it was my fault.
Well, see, I was going to ask you that. Did people make it back?
Oh, yeah, but you got to remember, were they coming back to Portland? These were transient workers, most of them. So they could come back. There is a guy, however, the people that built the underground, one of their sons decided, this isn't very exciting for me. I'm building this underground network for these Shanghaiers. They're having all the excitement. So this guy became a Shanghaier. And he was pushing the envelope. He was always doing things at the extreme and always on the boundary line of getting caught. And the people he had to worry about was the religious missionaries in the area. They're the only ones trying to stop Shanghai and white slavery. Well, this guy was always pushing the envelope. And one night he decides, I'm going to go for a walk along the waterfront. Well, instead of taking his bodyguards, which they had to bring with them, he didn't. He wanted to be by himself. Well, he ran into some guys that he had shanghaied. They got back to Portland. They recognized this guy. They beat him up, and then they threw him in the river. And in the Willamette River, that's where his body was found. Wow. And they say, ever since that night of his death, you could hear him crying out from that river for help. If anybody went to help him, he would grab them, drag them down to the bottom of the Willamette, and shanghai them forever into Davy Jones's locker. Now, in 1925, when they put in they tore the waterfront down and put in the seawall, people actually saw him on the seawall, hanging onto it. If they go to help him, try to drag them and pull them into that river. And over the years, there's 4 people that have told me, I saw that guy. He was all wet, and he tried to grab me.
People are always asking me, Karen, you are so knowledgeable about tarot, ghosts, and otherworldly spirits. How do you stay so organized and grounded here on Earth? And I have to tell them my secret weapon. It's black tourmaline. And Nita over at nitaapple.com. After years of complaining about all the text messages and emails back and forth, trying to schedule tarot readings and chasing after payments, Nita installed Acuity Scheduler on my website, and now I just get a little ding on my phone, and that tells me someone has made an appointment and the money is already in my account. I love that little ding, except every time it goes off, Courage runs to his food bowl. 5 minutes with Nita can save you 5 hours of bumbling around and trying to do things yourself. So if you spend 10 minutes with her, that'll save you like 72 hours or something like that. I don't know, I'm not good with math, but you know who is? Nita. That's who I would ask. Want to end all the emails back and forth and get paid up front when clients schedule time with you? Then hop on over to nitaapple.com/services and let Nita get you set up with a simple system that will make your life so much easier. Use coupon code BOO4U and get 20% off any products or services. She's got a lot of services and products that can save you time and money. That's BOO4U, all lowercase, BOO, the number 4, the letter U, and get 20% off. That's Nita Apple at nitaapple.com/services. nitaapple.com/services, and make your life easier today. Wow. Well, what a perfect segue into what I want to talk to you now, which is the hauntings. There you go. It's this whole topic blows my mind. I could talk to you for hours, Michael. So, wow. So there's our first, legend around the tunnels. That's amazing. I do want to ask one thing. The missionaries, so somebody did, step in. There was actually a moral voice going, no, this shouldn't be happening. Did they actually end up being the reason it stopped, or did the, port did everybody die out that was doing this? How did it actually end?
Yeah, the missionaries started really a lot of their work in the 1870s and 80s, and they opened up. How they got involved? I'll go into that real quick. They would stand outside a saloon and warn people going into that saloon, "You'll never come out of that. You're going to be shanghaied." And finally, the Shanghaiers got tired of this, so they would send out a group of people to beat them up. And I mean, they beat these missionaries up badly. And they were generally by themselves. And so they would leave, the missionary would. He'd come back with a band who couldn't play very well, but they were big guys. And they were his bodyguards for this missionary. So finally, they opened up sailor missions that would draw these men into a safe harbor. And that's how their involvement really started. So, but no, they didn't have any power. Nobody listened to them, because everybody's being paid. They're making money off this.
Wow. Yeah, that's and did it eventually just technology came in and it dried up, or how did it actually kind of fizzle out, I guess would be a way to say it.
Well, what happened when World War One hit? A lot of wooden merchant ships, were blown up by the German U-boats. So they started building ships out of metal and using steam. That cut down the need for men, but it didn't end Shanghai. Shanghai ended in late 1941 when World War II broke out. And, the thing is, you cannot be fighting against Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany and doing Shanghai, and that doesn't make sense. So they eliminated, they stopped Shanghai men. And plus the fact, you're a merchant ship. You have to have battleship escorts and stuff like that. So it just all came to an end. It was a perfect timing, which, was over 91 years later, something like that it all came to an end. Technology, played a role, but it didn't end it. And the missionaries, we go back into that because that ties right into the hauntings. There was a lady, they called her Nina, and she was a Native American who lived along the Columbia River. And she was grabbed by white slavers, brought to Portland, sold into prostitution. And the missionaries decided to work with her, and they promised her, if you give us all the information about the Shanghaiers, we'll get you back home to your family. Now, she knew she wouldn't, this was very dangerous. But she had to
so she was in other words, she was taking the chance. They were saying, if you would take this chance in Shanghai. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and just by taking her, these missionaries were at risk too, because she represented a lot of money for what she could do for them. So she gave them all this information, knowing she's risking her life. So these missionaries, who were very naive, took it to the police.
Oh.
Who were on the take. And they wanted to know who provided all this great information. And when they mentioned Nina, 2 nights later, she's thrown down the elevator shaft. And ever since the night of her death, she has haunted the underground. Now, what's interesting, the elevator doors that she was thrown through ended up in an underground area that we restored, and that's our new tour that's opening up, and they're on display in that new tour area. And their elevator doors, like, I don't think anybody's ever seen anything like this. They're wood, they've got glass in them. They're really incredible. And she is sighted by there all the time, but she makes her way around the underground. And when she shows up, you have no idea when she's going to show up. And when things start to happen underground, it catches me off guard all the time. When people who work with me know when I stop talking, when I freeze, that means something's happening. And also, if I try to talk through when I see something, I can't do it. I mess up so bad.
I can imagine you must have a sort of a relationship with the spirits that are down there. I know when I interviewed Howard, we got, like, you must know EVPs. We got like 20 EVPs and one of them, it was right in the beginning. Howard says, this has got a kind of a dark history. And there is a voice. I cannot tell if it's a female or a male that screams, "Help me," so clearly and so loud that I couldn't tell if it was a male whose voice he had screamed it so many times that it's you can't tell if he's male or female, or if it was a female, but it was just bone chilling.
Yes, that is very, very typical. And when people are doing EVPs, and does your audience pretty much know what that is?
They should. Electronic voice phenomena, the taping of ghost voices, as they show up on tape more so than in a conversation. How's that for a quick one?
Right. Yeah, that's really good. And because, like when I'm doing my tours, I cannot hear them, but sometimes I can. For example, I'm by these cork boots, and cork boots are the spike boots loggers used in the woods, and they never took them off. When they came to town, they were wearing them. When they went to bed at night in the logging camps, they were wearing them because they took them off, they're gone in the morning. They slept in them. So I'm by the cork boots talking, and all of a sudden I have this great group with me. They're just glued to me as I'm talking. And all of a sudden I hear this kid, this boy, and this adult male arguing over money. I'm thinking, okay, this is interesting. I'm doing a tour. They're on a tour and they're arguing about money. So I thought, okay, one of my volunteers will step in and get them quiet. Nobody did. So I'm getting distracted, and I'm thinking to myself, well, if I'm distracted, my tour group's distracted, but they're glued to me. And 3 times I almost said, will you guys knock it off? But little voice in my head told me, don't do that. You'll look like a fool. So I didn't say anything. So I made my way over to my volunteer. I said, what was going on with that argument between that guy and that kid? What? Nobody's talking but you. And I suddenly realized what they were talking about. They were arguing about money. The Shanghaiers hired these orphan kids right off the street, and they hired them to clean out the chamber pots and buckets that was used in the holding cells. This kid wasn't paid. Another time in the same spot, and we're waiting for this group that's late. And I'm just leaving that section by the cork boots, and I hear about 3 drunken women laughing. And it's coming from the first section where that group was supposed to show up. And I made a comment. I says, oh my God, I feel sorry for so-and-so. They have those drunken women on their tour. And volunteer looked at me and said, Michael, they didn't show up. I says, well, who are those drunken women laughing? She says, didn't hear a thing.
Wow. You have to be so in tune with those tunnels.
Yeah, and we're very, everyone who works in the Shanghai tunnels, we're very protective of the environment, the history, and the spirits that are there. And when people try to come in and do an investigation, what really gets to us is when they try to provoke them.
Oh, yeah.
There's nothing to provoke. We get very angry. And, we have a working trap door. And things kind of happen by that trap door. And I had a new volunteer and said he knew exactly when to pull the trap door. And I'm in the way of it, okay, where I'm standing. And I generally move out of the way before it drops. Well, he pulled at the wrong time, and my left shoulder just moved to the right time and missed me. But I didn't remember pulling my shoulder. But of course, I had to do that. How else my shoulder would have been pulled and trapped or miss it? Okay, I thought, okay, I must have done that. So the next time, another volunteer pulls at the wrong time, I am physically pushed out of the way.
Wow.
Then after that, this has happened about 6 or 7 times. When they're ready to pull the trap door, a lady yells in my right ear, watch out, the trap door is going to be pulled, watch out. And everybody says, the look on my face. But yeah, this woman has helped me. Who the woman is, I have no idea.
You don't think she's Mana?
Nina? Could have been. Nina, yeah, could have been. But what's interesting, I've seen Nina several times on our tours, and also her friend. First time I saw her, this was like going back 16, 17 years ago. It was on Halloween night, and I saw these 2 women in these black Victorian-like dresses come through what we call the hole in the wall, going from one building to the next. And they both had to kind of bend over to keep hitting their head on the top bricks. And they both turned and looked at me and gave me this sly smile that I interpreted to mean, you're not going to tell us what to do. We are going to do what we want, whenever we want. And they walked right by 4 volunteers and left. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if the building owners knew we just let people wander through here, we wouldn't be here. So I made my way to the volunteers and I said, hey, what happened to those 2 ladies? They go, what 2 ladies? I said, the 2 ladies in the black Victorian dresses. They looked at me. They said there was no women in black Victorian dresses that came through the hole in the wall. Nobody did. Wow. And they said I turned a ghostly white. And that ghostly white stayed with me for about 8 hours. I was white for 8 hours. Wow. And so another time, I'm going through the hole in the wall. I got a group behind me. There's 2 women behind me who are in black dresses. And I'm talking to them because they asked me a question. So I'm talking to them. Volunteers standing there and I go, Michael, who are you talking to? I go, the 2 ladies in the dresses behind me. They go, Michael, you're the only one here. Everybody else is still on the other side by the opium den.
Wow. Wow. They must just be so, they just know you. I bet they look forward to seeing you.
Yeah, we kind of have an interesting time. One time, I'll tell you, this paranormal investigator came through and he was doing the provoking. It was really not good. And he wasn't getting any response from his ghost box. Have you talked about ghost boxes before?
Yeah, people know that's the radio that scans and you can hear, sometimes you can hear a voice over it of someone that's not in the room, which would be the spirit or, so he's running his ghost box trying to, which, by the way, just a note, sometimes I find spirits find that very annoying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of noise. But anyways, he's using his ghost box and he's like provoking the spirits. I mean, he's saying some really bad stuff and everybody's getting pissed. And so finally he goes, he had a group with him. He says, I guess the ghosts don't like me. And I said, let me try. And I said, do you like us telling your stories and your history? And a woman's voice came not from the ghost box, but outside the ghost box. She said, yes, we do.
Oh.
He did not like that.
That's such a bright spot in this that they must really feel like you're telling the story that needs to be told.
Yes, and I didn't want to do these tours. I'm being honest. I was kind of forced into it. I started with my classes at Portland State that I was teaching, and people knew I'd been in the underground, and they said, oh, develop a class around this. So I thought, I'll develop a class, and so I did, and at that time, we couldn't move anything. We started, going through very clean, ended up very dirty. And then one of the building owners or business owners said, oh, well, I'll let you start digging. And so I started digging. I thought, oh, this will last a week. We'd probably be stopped. We weren't. And more people heard about it. And then all of a sudden, people wanted tours. And I thought, oh, God, do I want to do this? And that was 26 years ago.
Wow.
And we're expanding, have a second section, and we're going to have a third section opening up.
When I did, when you talk about provoking, I do little comedy videos, which if you go to my website, you'll see. And I was going to do one, and the joke was, it actually came out pretty good, but the joke was that I was the only Shanghai. They were like, no, we've returned her. We don't want her back. But originally when I was shooting it, my thought was, hey, let's go in the tunnel and just shoot it. You dragging me off and then dragging me the other way. And I spent about a minute in that tunnel, and I was like, not doing it here. We can, fake it upstairs, but I thought there was too much activity and it would probably be upsetting. And I thought, just out of respect and a little bit of fear, I was like, I'm not doing that in the tunnel.
That is really good. They really believe in education, I've learned, and warning people, not just about the past, but the present. We have a horrible human trafficking going on. And it's not getting any better. There's lots of money to be made. That's why this stuff goes on. People are making money off it. It wouldn't happen. But, we abuse people. in so many horrendous ways. And I don't know where we're going, but I really believe people have to be educated.
Yeah, as because that is another one of those things we think is, we've outgrown that, or people are better, and they are not. I have a friend who wrote a book. In fact, I called her to recommend on the other one, a place where if people want to donate money, either, if you have a place working on the history of the tunnels or to human trafficking, some good people that are doing good work. But she was sold into human trafficking in Japan, and she got out. And it's funny that they talk about how they break people, because she said there became a point where the only thought she would allow in her head was, I'm going to be back home to see my daughter. And it's fascinating how it's amazing. She is a true hero. And then a guy shows up that helped her. It's probably one of the most rarest. It just needs to be a movie because it was so good. But you're absolutely right there. You think humanity changes, and it doesn't.
Yeah, we started my first tour 26 years ago. After it, somebody came up to me and asked, what about human trafficking today? I said, that's a very good question. And back in those days, Portland was trying to deny it was happening here. And it definitely was. And eventually they got a task force going that we do work with. And we started what we call Breaking Through the Silence Project. And it's to educate people using multimedia about human trafficking. And we do a lot of work with this. And a lot of the work we're trying to let people know that it can happen to anybody. And there's not just young people being victimized. There's people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that are being victimized. And it's really a horrendous thing. But people today who are victims of human trafficking are like those of the past. They don't like to talk about it. They're afraid to talk about it. They feel bad. They feel it will never be accepted.
They feel those people could come back and find them again.
The fear and the reality of it. I mean, it's really, really something. And I don't know what's going to happen in this country about human trafficking, because I think we've made some progress, and I don't think we're making the right progress for the future, because we're cutting back on money to fight this. Those that come across the border that provide information about who are victims of human traffickers, who risk their life and their family's life by sharing information with the authorities, they used to be able to get visas. I understand they're cutting that program now. Ugh. And that means the information that was provided that was very, very helpful to combat this is going to go away. And it's like pushing a boulder up a waterfall. It is not easy, but you have to do this. And if you don't do this, it's going to get worse. Like the days of Shanghai and white slavery, you deny it happens, it gets worse in the future.
Yeah. And one last question before I let you go. And in that note, do you have a suggestion for people, organization a specific one that they could give money to or would help out or something like that? I can ask my friend at the end, but if you have something here, please feel free to put that out there.
Well, you can donate to our Breaking Through the Silence Project. It's a human trafficking education program. We can always use help. Like I say, we've done a lot of programs. In fact, every month we do a First Thursday concert for human trafficking awareness, where we invite in singer-songwriters to do their own original music and to deal with human trafficking. And we broadcast this through Metro East Media, which is the East County Cable Access. They have 13 different broadcast channels, and trying to get people aware of what is going on, because awareness and education is going to be some of the means to combat this. Right. And you think about the past, where they didn't deal with it. Well, why is it surprising we have such a problem today? And I-5, which is the main corridor for the human traffickers today, will take you to Canada and Mexico. And so people vanish.
Yeah. And, I know my friend works with a group, and one of her friends was literally a nanny in LA. And people didn't realize she was in an affluent neighborhood. She was out walking the kids with finally one of the other parents picked up on what was going on and figured it out. But I mean, that's somebody walking down the street with a child in LA, a nanny. Like it's, they bought her from the Philippines or something, and she speaks now. But where would it be breakingthesilence.com or .org, or is there a website or a place?
You just would send it to get more information. Shanghai Tunnels, or actually portlandtunnels.com. That's the best.
Yes. And everybody go to that site. Anyways, if you're going to Portland, you got to go. We're the tip of the iceberg here on this wonderful podcast of the stuff that Michael knows and can tell you on the tours. It's fantastic. And okay, so my last question, you got to leave us, because we're on my podcast, people. We like the scary quite a bit. Is there a scary ghost story you can tell us about, something negative?
About something negative? Sure. Friday the 13th, Shanghaiers were just as superstitious as those that were put aboard ships. The captains were superstitious. The sailors were superstitious. And the Shanghaiers decided not to Shanghai any men during Friday the 13th. But a minute after, when it came to the 14th, they could go ahead. Well, one of the Shanghaiers decided, if no one else is going to Shanghai men, I will. So he made a deal with the captain, who needed 13 men. Now, that's a lot of men. Yeah. But he needed 13 men. So he says, I buy him on the Friday the 13th, and then a minute after, into the 14th, I will go ahead and set sail. So he brought all these men there, and he needed one more man. Captain says, well, our deal was 13 men. You only brought me 12. So the guy went out and went into an alley, saw this guy, couldn't get a good look at him, but he took a club and knocked him out, put him in what we call a Shanghaier's cart, which is a wheels cart, wheeled it through the underground up and to the ship. And the captain, first mate, standing there, and they're looking at this guy, the victim. And the Shanghai had never really looked at him very well. Captain says, okay, I guess I'll take him reluctantly. And the Shanghaiers dragged this guy down below to the forward hold. First mate and Shanghaier says, oh my, and the captain said, this Shanghaier is terrible. He Shanghaied his own twin brother. Well, the guy, anyways, the Shanghaier doesn't come back up. They're ready to set sail. So they sent the first mate down. They couldn't find him. Then the first mate went down with some other men, and they went all through the ship and couldn't find him. What it turned out, he had Shanghaied himself.
Oh, dear. Oh, my God. Well, there's a great karma story. That's fascinating. Well, Michael, it has been a pleasure. I'm glad I got a hold of you. Again, everybody, it's portlandtunnels.com. This is Michael P. Jones. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to promote or put out there before we end, Michael?
Yes, we have a new section open up. There's a third section, which will be under Harvey's Comedy Club, and we're hoping to have that open by October.
I got to get back to the club, because I had such a good time so it was not good. I would say a very intense paranormal experience in that tunnel. But thank you so much, Michael. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. Well, hopefully we'll be on again.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I can promise that. Hey, everybody, that's our podcast for today. If you can do me a favor and please leave me a review wherever you listen, whether that is Google or iTunes. I am now up on YouTube. So if you want to fool your employer, you can listen to me there. All the podcasts go right up there too. I believe now I am on Spotify and all over the place. So you can listen wherever you like. Please send me an email at paranormalkaren@gmail.com or karenrontowski@gmail.com. You can always find me with Karen Rontowski or Paranormal Karen. I love to hear from you, guests you like, things that didn't work, suggestions for new shows, your ghost stories or conspiracy theories. I'm getting ready to record some more of your stories with my sister Sue. We always have a blast and love hearing from you. Let's see, September 7th through 9th, you can see me at the Tahoe Biltmore in a paranormal retreat. It is a whole weekend, not just a show. I'm going to be there with John Zaffis. I'm going to be there with Dave Schrader, my favorite radio paranormal host of all time. It is going to be a blast. You can't lose if you're going to Tahoe. It is just beautiful. Thanks to Mike at Uno Rising Media, my producer, for putting this all together. That is it. Here's my new tag phrase. It's my old one. I hope you enjoy it. If you have the choice, never choose normal. Come on, somebody email me a better tag phrase. I would love that. Or if you play an instrument, let's hear my my theme song, or my earworm, as my sister says. Thanks, everybody.